Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to At World's Edge, the Fantasy Lore podcast. I wanted to take a moment today and talk about the Nemesis Crown with the upcoming release of Patch 5.0 and Total War Warhammer 3's Thrones of Decay DLC. A lot of fans might be wondering out there what it is that the Nemesis Crown is, why it's important to the lore, where did it come from, and what did it do. Well, today we're going to go ahead and talk about all of those things in a quick video. And if you have any questions or if you have something to add, please do so in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to field those or to correct myself if I'm wrong. The Nemesis Crown is in our world is a campaign that took place in 2008, right after the Storm of Chaos. So this was the first time that Games Workshop tried to have Archaon destroy the old world, but the global campaign, while it was very successful, it had some great impact on player engagement. It didn't end up actually having any lore impact, with the exception of uh, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which does seem to follow the world that took place if Storm of Chaos had happened. But when you bring in the end times, it seems like maybe Storm of Chaos didn't. But regardless, the Storm of Chaos campaign was very successful. Lots of people got involved. There were great new models. And then Games Workshop released the Nemesis Crown campaign. In theory, with better technology and the lessons they learned from Storm of Chaos and Albion and all of the other global campaigns they'd done, Nemesis Crown should have been amazing. In fact, it was kind of a whiff. It didn't really do much in terms of the lore; it didn't move it forward at all. And later, it seems to have been almost entirely retconned out by the end times. So we'll see how that. We'll see if that's relative to the trajectory of Total War Warhammer 3. But in universe, the Nemesis Crown is actually much more interesting. So the Nemesis Crown was created by Alaric the Mad, who you probably recognize as the dwarven runesmith who created the rune fangs, which are the famous 12 swords held by Sigmar's chieftains, and then later the Elector Counts of the Empire. Alaric the Mad was driven mad by his creation of the Nemesis Crown. This was an attempt to use the Rune of Kingship, which Dwarven players may be familiar with as a great boon to your Dwarf Lord, but to change it slightly. So in lore, the Rune of Kingship takes the memories and personality of the bearer and transfers it to the next person that uses that item. So if you're a dwarven lord and you have a crown with the Rune of Kingship inscribed on it, which would have been common, then your descendant, upon wearing that crown, would receive the wisdom that you had passed on to them. Very effective for a leader. When it comes to the Nemesis Crown, however, Alaric the Mad created a new type of rune, and this rune was supposed to be an enhancement to the Rune of Kingship, but he couldn't figure out exactly how to bind all of the elements that he wanted. If you remember, or if you're familiar with runecraft, essentially runes trap the winds of magic and force them to do certain things. So if you want a rune of strength, you trap magic, and then it expels itself by strengthening the item that it's held in. Runes can become depowered by using the magic that's stored up, and then repowered by absorbing more magic from the wind. The Nemesis Crown, however, the rune was too powerful. It couldn't be created with traditional metals, and he tried all of them. He tried all the metals. He tried gromril and gold and silver and iron. None of it worked. Permutations of the metals didn't work until he discovered or rediscovered warpstone. Warpstone, for those of you who are familiar with Warhammer lore, is the magical remnants of Morrslieb, the Chaos Moon, which crashes down to Malice every now and again. And every time that there's a large discovery of it, it's used for essentially nefarious magical purposes. Nagash built Nagashazar on top of a Warpstone mine. Mordheim was crushed by Warpstone. There's even giant chunks of Warpstone that form the basis of Skaven society, which gives you an indication of how messed up it is. We've seen Warpstone in the past being used by Tzeentch to destroy the dwarven kingdom of Barak Var during the War of the Beard, and we've also seen it take on the battlefield take the form of warp fire throwers and other weapons of mass destruction in a medieval term. So when it came to using Warpstone, Alaric the Mad created the Nemesis Crown and drew the rune in Warpstone rather than regular metal, which not only was strong enough to bind the rune itself, but it gave it a nefarious edge. Warpstone is inherently chaotic, and while Alaric's intentions may have been to transfer the wisdom of the entire race of the bearer into their head, it actually kind of magnified their worst intentions. Dwarves who wore the crown would become uh, avaricious and greedy and violent. Skaven, who would wear the crown, would potentially become extra devious and paranoid. Men would become gluttonous and fearful and wrathful. Elves, I guess, would become even more arrogant. Ooh. But the point was that it took, instead of the wisdom of just one person, it drew the wisdom, or rather the feelings, of an entire race. Alaric the Mad eventually realized, not eventually, pretty quickly realized this was entirely too dangerous to keep in mortal hands, but he was unable to destroy it. Much like the Infinity Stones of the Marvel Universe, nothing that no he couldn't have any craft or any ability to destroy this item. So instead, he hid it in the Empire in the Drakwald Mountains, in a mine that had been abandoned since the War of the Beard. And here it laid for 2,500 years, until it was stumbled across by goblins who inhabit that region. The goblins themselves discovered the crown and started to wear it. However, each time one put it on his head, they were immediately killed by all of their compatriots until there was nothing left. Um, upon hearing of this discovery, the dwarves sent out uh, scouting parties to identify the item, believing it may be a lost runic item that they need to recover. And that's, of course, one of the things that Thorgrim Grudgebearer does. And so they did. They found it, they recovered the crown, and then immediately that party killed themselves, leaving only one behind. The parties of the Old World, especially the Empire, but also the Beastmen, Dwarves, Elves, all have a stake in trying to get the Nemesis Crown because it's an item of immense magical power. And so they send armies to the Drakwald to scour the land and recover the crown. In theory, the crown could pass between group to group, person to person, bearer to bearer, empowering them, but also driving them slightly crazy, and also turning everyone around them against them as they understood how dangerous they were. The Nemesis Crown campaign in lore ended with the dwarves recovering the crown. Grimgor defeats Archaon. The Empire um, tag teams up with Bretonnia to kick out the Greenskins, and the dwarves walk away with the crown, sealing it in Karaza Karak. There, presumably, it was destroyed when the world was destroyed by chaos. So there, so that is where we are. The Nemesis Crown campaign in the real world back in the 2000s, and then today, the Nemesis Crown in the gaming world. So I hope you enjoyed this. It's unscripted, which I don't normally do, but I was feeling peckish today and decided to do an ad hoc video. But I hope you found it informative, and if you have any thoughts or suggestions or hated it, please leave that in the comments. Thank you so much, and you have a great day.